This is Pretty Much Pop, a culture podcast. We're good, but are we pretty good? Today we're discussing Curb Your Enthusiasm, the 12-season HBO sitcom created by Larry David in 2000 after his tenure as showrunner for Seinfeld. I'm Mark Linsenmeyer, currently staring into each and every one of your ears to determine if you're lying to me.
I'm Sarah Lynn Bruck. I've always relied on slight technicalities to get myself out of prison.
This is Lawrence Ware coming from Oklahoma, and I may be awkward, slightly evil, and a misanthrope, but you can't deny that I'm funny.
I'm Al Baker coming at you from Leeds in the UK, and I thought the ending of the last podcast didn't go down too well, but that we should do exactly the same thing this time.
The exact same thing.
Perfect.
All over again. Exactly what Seinfeld did, all over again. Better this time, though. Better this time.
I thought, Lauren, you had said you'd never seen Curb. Had you experienced much Seinfeld?
Oh, I watched all of Seinfeld. I love Seinfeld.
Okay.
Oh, no. I deeply, deeply love Seinfeld. I didn't love the ending of Seinfeld. I thought that last episode was a little awkward. We can kind of get into that because the ending of Seinfeld absolutely mirrors the ending of Curb Your Enthusiasm. But I loved Seinfeld. It was one of my favorite shows. It was, it was a different time. It was a time when everyone would sit down and watch television at the same time. And like, we just don't do that anymore. That we don't have that monoculture where everyone watches the same thing. But Seinfeld was definitely that show where everyone was watching it. I loved that show. And I had very high hopes for Curb Your Enthusiasm since Seinfeld and this show has so much in common. A little bit of a teaser.
Was Seinfeld part of Must-See TV? Was that channel, NBC?
Was that NBC? Was that Thursday night Must-See TV? Yeah.
Must-See TV.
Because if I remember, it was like Seinfeld and like ER. Am I right about that?
ER was
right.
at 10.
Those were the bookends, and
Yeah.
I think everything else changed. Like maybe Friends was in there sometime, Frasier was in there sometime,
Right.
Various other things that they tried to promote were in there at various times.
But Seinfeld and ER were the things that were always there. And it was appointment television. Every Thursday night, we used to watch it.
Absolutely.
What is all your all's background with this show?
So I saw Curb Your Enthusiasm before I saw maybe a handful of episodes of Seinfeld, but I never watched Seinfeld properly until like a couple of years ago. But I watched Curb from more or less exactly when it came out, and Seinfeld has since become one of my all-time favorite shows. I can't believe that I slept on it for so long. And rewatching so much Curb in the last week and a half, it is incredible to me. A few things comparing the two shows just stand out to me as like incredibly interesting. The first is that I don't think I'd ever properly internalized that Seinfeld finished in 1998 and Curb Your Enthusiasm first came on the air in the year 2000, but the two shows feel decades apart. And the other thing that I thought was incredibly interesting through watching Curb again recently is how far they are the same show. How easy it is to see that Curb Your Enthusiasm comes from the same brain as the guy who was one of the main driving forces behind Seinfeld. And it's an incredibly interesting case study of what happens if you take basically the same creative vision and put it in a different context in terms of the production. You take one of the key co-stars away or co-creators away in Jerry Seinfeld, and you wind up with a show whose underlying themes, I guess, and statement and like ideas and not aesthetic actually, but so much of it is essentially identical, but so many of the surface features have changed. It can turn it into a show that feels a million worlds away.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't a huge Seinfeld stan, but I watched it religiously every week just so that, because I'm a member of society, basically. And I enjoyed it, but it wasn't the water cooler show for me. And it might just be because of where I was in my life in the 90s. TV wasn't a central part of my life.
How old were you in the
either.
90s? Like, what was going on with you in the 90s?
I was in my 20s. Throughout the 90s, I was doing my own thing. TV wasn't the central part of my evenings, but I did watch it. And then when we moved to LA, that's when Curb started, and we really, really enjoyed that show at the beginning. And then after a few seasons, we kind of fell off. And it might have been, again, my daughter was born in 2004. And so it was probably right around then that we just had less time to devote to Curb Your Enthusiasm. I mean, we enjoyed it, and it was really fun to go back and revisit some of these seasons. But I just finished watching quite a number of episodes of the season 7, I think. Al, you had suggested it, where they have the Seinfeld reunion. And I had never seen that before. And it was hilarious. I really, really enjoyed that season. So I might go back and have a look again. Neither of these shows were sort of formative shows for me, but I definitely laughed every time I sat down and watched it.
Yeah, I was thinking that Seinfeld was such a big deal that it would be nice to have a show related to that at some point. And I thought maybe this would be that show, but there's so much just about Curb that I almost feel like, okay, we can, sort of as a launching point, we could compare the two a little bit. Because it's sort of that there was an element in Seinfeld that has now been extracted and expanded. And so there were other things going on in Seinfeld that had the stand-up comedy element and the ongoing who's going to get a girlfriend and what, just sort of soap opera-y sitcom thing. And, it was hardly like warm and fuzzy. That was sort of the point, that it was not warm and fuzzy. But there was more. You could just, I'm just a Kramer fan. I want to, enjoy those hijinks or whatever. And you didn't necessarily have to be on board for really internalizing the Larry David sensibility. Whereas in this, it is just, if you don't like that character, you're just not going to like the show.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And man,
that
Kramer
type of humor,
crashed
too.
and burned, didn't he? Good Lord, Kramer, after that show, woo.
Yeah, he got into some trouble.
So you say if you don't like Larry David, then you're not going to like Curb Your Enthusiasm. But it brings us on to an important question, which is, what is the appropriate way to feel about Larry David as a character? And because the show doesn't think he's always right. Right. The show
definitely doesn't think that. Yeah, the show doesn't think he's right.
And he's not always wrong either.
But he's not always wrong. And I was driving myself crazy trying to think of like what a consistent answer to that question is. Like, how does Larry David want us to perceive him as a character in the show? And I gave up. I don't think there is actually a consistent answer to that.
A consistent answer to that, honestly, because I think that depending on the show and maybe depending on the season, sometimes the show is like, yes, this is how this character is right, and this character is right about these things. And then another show, it's a completely different situation where the character feels strongly about something and the show is absolutely saying this character is wrong. So I think that the show is not consistent in any kind of meaningful way. And while I didn't love this show, I did like that. I liked that oscillation between the character's right, the character's wrong, and it's part of the fun to look on the character and sometimes be like, God damn it, that's right. I would never say that, but that's right, God damn it. And then there's another time where you would watch the show and be like, you know what, that is wrong, and I'm backing away from this. Like, that is part of the fun.
And he puts out a lot of energy into all of those small, petty grievances he has. Even when he's right, as a viewer, I'm thinking, why are like tipping? It seems like tipping is just this running theme throughout the entire series.
It absolutely is.
And maybe it's just me
because
I have these arguments with my husband about tipping. And I'm like, why are you putting so much thought into this? Just give them the money and then be done with it and stop thinking about it. You can stop worrying about it if you just...
I low-key agree with Larry David on the tipping.
Oh, I'm sure. But I just think it's just so funny that just tipping alone, almost every single episode or every other episode, it's brought up in some way.
Is there any other show that makes this sort of comment or is not afraid to speak from the point of view about or of affluence? That, that because he has no material needs, then his life is basically meaningless and there's nothing that he has to do. And so it really just gets filled with pettiness. And of course, in dealing with people, service workers who have economic problems, of course, as a rich person, you should just, all of his peers are just like, of course, tip whatever whatever is a tip more than is asked for. Don't balk if service people want you to pay such and such. like, just don't worry. But he's so like this, there's nothing else for him to worry about. So like, let's penny pinch. And maybe this is a comment on sort of of course we brought this up in the Jewish comedy episode. If this is is he penny pinching? Is he, it's playing on that trope.
No. It's really interesting that it's Larry David as Larry David in the show, because one of the things that you get from that is he has nearly infinite Seinfeld money and an aversion to working very hard, and basically is free to spend his life like pursuing vendettas against people who he thinks he's wronged. But you're right, Mark, that one of the consequences of that is that it doesn't matter to him financially, like whether he is paying a $400 tip or a $40 tip. Like, none of these slights that involve him giving up money matter to him in the end, because he has infinite Seinfeld money. But that also allows him to only care about manners and rightness, like as he conceives them. And I think that's really the core of what he gets, rightly or wrongly, what he gets pissed off about. This is what was argued in that article I shared with you guys from the New York Times.
Yeah, I loved that article.
Best understood as a comedy of manners, which really clarified a lot of things about it for me. And I think what you mentioned, Mark, is important there, because the fact that he is just free from any kind of material constraints at all means he can have a really pure, high-level view of the way that we kind of scrabble around with each other in the dirt.
And is some of the inconsistency that you were mentioning, Lawrence, at least the inconsistency I was seeing was that sometimes he is the imposer of these laws. Like,
right.
I'm offended because you didn't do a thing. More often than not, he's like, oh, these laws are all arbitrary and I should just do, I think this is fair, even though, this is not what. So he's trying to think outside the box to create law, as opposed to just recognize it. Seinfeld, it seemed like it was more, don't you know that that's a thing you should do?
Yeah. It's like these unspoken rules, like the unspoken rules, that make society chug along without us all, reaching for each other's throats. And I like the fact that sometimes he is the one, he's like, no, it's, you're not supposed to, oh wait, this was on the fake Seinfeld episode where he said, no, you never blow your nose in a cloth napkin, which is correct. At a restaurant, you just don't do that because it's gross. But you can sneeze in a cloth napkin because you have like 2 seconds before your face is going to explode. And so, but I just love that he is talking about these unspoken rules, and either he is the one who is, enforcing them, or he's the one who's, fighting against them.
And the show is very philosophical that way, in a very intro to philosophy kind of way. So, because this is the kind of stuff that I do with my intro to philosophy classes. Like, I will look at certain rules that are established in society, particularly gendered rules. I love to do that. And we will examine, why do we behave that way and why can't we behave differently? And so it is kind of philosophical in that way, but not very deep, right? It's not trolley car level philosophically, or, utilitarianism, or God forbid Kant. It's not that deep, but it's very surface level stuff. And so that's the reason why I think it is so approachable and so likable in many ways, but also kind of irritating if you think deeply about the stuff that he's bringing up. You begin to realize it's kind of nonsense, but it's funny on the surface, but there's nothing more there, I don't think. Although Al seems like he may disagree with me.
No, you just made me think that there's something about Socrates, about Larry David, just like the insane man in the town square rushing around asking people questions that they think are annoying.
You may be onto something, Al. That is an insightful point.
Like, it's the kind of mad prophet thing. Because one of the reasons that Larry is so annoying in the show is that I think you said this, Mark, just a second ago, he puts himself in other people's business. Right, he's asking the questions. This happens so often, which is when he's talking to like black people or gay people or disabled people about their experiences of being black, gay, or disabled, or whatever else it might be. That's some of the cringiest stuff in the show, because you just, at least I'm just screaming at him to just like leave it. Just don't involve yourself. You don't need to be asking these questions. But he derives this perverse thrill from interrogating things that we'll just understand it better if you just leave them alone. Mm-hmm. Maybe he gets the same. He's the same kind of pervert that Socrates was. Maybe,
but he's still invited to. He's still invited to dinner parties. He's still beloved, right? I mean, it's really funny to see.
I mean, there's a difference between being invited to dinner parties and being beloved. I mean, he is who he is. He is who he is. And so I think that's why he's invited to the dinner parties. Is he beloved? And there's certain people who love him.
Yeah.
I think the friendships in the show are really lovely.
They're strange.
In a lot of ways.
Some of them are. Some of them are.
The Jeff Garland, Jeff and Larry relationship is really interesting, I think. I mean, just having Jeff who would do anything for this guy. Anything. I mean, he is employed by him, but at the same time, they're also best friends. You know, it's just.
But does it? But here's my question: that character or that person? I don't even know how to talk about these people. That person.
He's a character. He's a character.
But he's also.
Yes. Let's not cast aspersions on.
Okay. The character. Is that character played as like he's dumb for being the way that he is? Or is he played as this is a wonderful human being and he is wonderful? Because he seems exasperated, but also I don't know how to read that character.
He's very deadpan. I don't think exasperated almost at all. But is obviously a total slime bag in terms of all the cheating. Like that was introduced right, as sort of the very first plot beat. I had never before this experience seen the pilot that was not a pilot. Did you guys even watch this thing?
No, I never watched it.
But I think that's the only time he cheated was that.
No. It's a constant thing.
Oh, really?
Throughout the series of
totally went
this
over my
other
head.
thing to cover up one of his. I mean, maybe you just didn't rewatch that particular season, or what?
Then I didn't see that.
Yeah, there's a lot of cheating. And then later, she cheats on him as well. But I also love Susie and Jeff's relationship. There is something very real about it. And I love Susie's relationship with Larry, too, because I think, especially as the show goes on, there's a real... Like, you can see the affection in the way she calls him a cunt. And it made me quite emotional.
What's going on, guys? This is Lawrence dropping in real fast to just let you guys know about Factor, something I'm very excited about. Eating better is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-go meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted and dietitian approved and ready to go in just like 2 minutes. It's fast. And you'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart for those of you who want to slim down, Protein Plus for those of you who are in the gym trying to get your bulk on, and there's more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started today and go after your goals. Do me a favor. Go to factormeals.com/pretty50 and use code pretty50 to get 50% off. That's code pretty50 at factormeals.com/pretty50 to get 50% off. Go there, use the code. I promise you'll thank me later. I need to get into this, all right, because I did not like this show. So for the record, I didn't like the show. I'm not going to repeat saying I didn't like the show the way that I did last time because I don't want people who are listening to think that I'm a bad person. So I'm not going to keep doing that. But I didn't like the show. But maybe the reason why I didn't like the show is because I don't speak to my friends and the people that I love. And I just don't think that you talk to people that you care about the way they talk to each other. Right. And I understand that is part of the humor, but it's something off-putting about it for me.
I absolutely agree. I think I have just changed a lot as a person since this show started. But I think especially her character and the way she would go off, like it was similar when I would hear Howard Stern. And he would love to get people just yelling at each other. And that's just not a thing that we did in my family or whatever. So I just like, it would just, sort of shake me to my core.
I agree.
And I think just over time, I've gotten much more immune to that. Not that I do it in my personal life, but in terms of being presented in entertainment, now it doesn't bother me at all.
Well,
it was a hump that I had to get over.
The first season, though, did you like that first season when you saw it in that moment? Like, or is it something that you had to grow into liking?
I think I found it really cool. I like when things are more naturalistic. And so it just seemed like such a revolutionary show. Now it seems pretty contrived in a lot of ways. And that's why when it came off back on the air for so long, I felt like, oh, this is so much more contrived. Now this is like when they're discussing a rule, everybody knows about the rule. It's not just, something like in Seinfeld where somebody suggests there's a rule and the other person like, let me think about that. And maybe they run into somebody else. But no, it's everybody in the room is voicing in the same words.
Yeah.
This rule that you've never heard of as a listener, like is not actually a thing. Like, so that is the definition of contrived. And he just looks like he's having too much fun with it now. I feel like I got over it by this season, but anyway.
It does. I mean, one reason why we kind of fell off the show is because it just got really repetitive, and I think it also is pretty contrived. I think that's also, you wanted to talk a little bit about improv and how it affected the show and the way that these ideas are presented, and I think all of that yes-anding does make it. You are literally saying some of the same words and you're trying to heighten within the scene. And it can come across as less naturalistic than if you were just given a script with words that you're supposed to say.
I don't know the degree to which Larry David necessarily cares about naturalism as such.
Right.
There's certainly an aesthetic that he likes to lean into on Curb, but especially towards the later seasons, he's really happy to let absolutely insane things happen as plot points or scene moments or whatever else it might be. So yeah, and again, in just trying to think of Curb Your Enthusiasm as a whole thing, it's really interesting because it does have such a clear aesthetic and again the naturalism, the improv and everything else, but there is so much range, especially between seasons, in terms of the tone of the show and what kinds of stories, what kinds of jokes are going on. It's really hard to think about it as a single coherent thing.
The first season, so I started watching some of the earlier episodes, and these were rewatched, and I realized that it wasn't until later that he started having a thread that would connect an entire season, so they would have its own arc. And I don't know when that really started because the first season episodes, they were all standalones.
Was the Holocaust survivor the first thread?
Was
that season 2?
No, wasn't that part of when he did the producers?
Yeah, is that season 4? I watched all of season 4, I think, or almost all of it in prep for this. Because
Kobe, the survivor, that one seemed a little bit stupid.
That was it, but there's another plot, I think, in an earlier episode where there's someone he thinks is a Holocaust survivor, and it turned out he had a number written on his arm with a biro pen. And that turns up again and again. And I think that's the one with the restaurant. Also, the one with the restaurant enters.
I'm sorry, that's funny.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Right. So they're good conceptual jokes.
Yeah, they are good conceptual jokes.
This is why it's not just the same, even though it's the same character and it's the same pattern. Like there's actual jokes going on here, and it's not just him emitting his thing. So like that's what makes the show.
I mean, but yes,
I wanted to see it. I would watch more of it, definitely.
I mean, but yes. However, it does kind of get. There are, and it's not in the later season and it's not in the earlier season, but in those middle seasons, I noticed it's starting to get a little repetitive.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
And that's where I think that the break, even though Mark says that he came back and he didn't necessarily like what he got when he came back, it was a little bit more contrived for him. I think that break was necessary because it was getting repetitive. And that break allowed for him to kind of do something a little bit different. And when he came back, yes, the show had kind of changed a little bit, but it felt like it had a little bit more steam to it. And he had honestly more stuff to work with because he started tackling different subject matter. I don't know if we're going to get into Me Too and race and whatnot, but he started tackling different subject matter when he came back. But nevertheless, although he was kind of tackling race the entire time. Anyway, but nevertheless, it got kind of repetitive, and that's where I kind of started skipping some episodes because you guys know me, I'm a completist. I like watching everything. Like when we were doing the Dark Shadows thing, I went back, believe it or not, and I spent a lot of time up late at night watching all those Dark Shadows episodes, fast forwarding some stuff. But I watched a lot of that crap, right? I like that. And so when we said we were going to do Curb Your Enthusiasm, I put forth a good faith effort to try to watch all this. But in the middle seasons, it got repetitive. And I kind of started skipping episodes here and there.
Yeah, that's how we were too. We got a little bit bored with it. And it's funny, just to bring it back, like, I don't think any of us, it sounds like, kind of felt seen by the characters in the show. Like I know personally, like I don't relate to any of them.
Yeah. No,
however, my husband Josh does. Like he knows so many people that are who are like that in the show.
Really?
He's got his own Susie Essman. He's got his own Jeff Garland. He's got his own Larry. Like there are definitely people like that he could point to in his own life. And even
is your husband Jewish? Is that the
I was just about to ask that. I didn't know if that was appropriate to ask. I was hoping someone else would ask, but I was thinking the exact same thing.
But yeah, he is. And he's, and he's New York, New Jersey Jew. So it's like a very particular, and so he gets a lot of this stuff. And that's, for him, Seinfeld was appointment television for him and his family, like all of that. And it was a great, those were great shows. If you were Jewish, you definitely felt seen. But even still, like we loved Curb at the beginning, and even Josh got a little bit tired of it. He was like, yeah, it's the same stuff. So
I almost wanted to, just as a philosopher of race, I know I sent you one episode early on where he's dealing with this, which is very much in the, I don't know if you could do that exactly right now in that way.
No, you couldn't.
But in
no, you couldn't.
I'm a white guy making faux pas. And, if the fact that you are as an audience member, are following him with the camera, that you can understand mostly where he's coming from. And then it just, it's the embarrassment humor of, he's gotten himself in a sticky situation. But like, it's not that you necessarily think, oh, you're a terrible person. It's presented as this is some guy that's trying to joke around and be friends with everybody. And it's just, a clueless old white guy. But then he does revisit this again and again. And there's an episode called, the affirmative action is the one that I pointed you at.
Yeah,
or is that later?
I think that's the one you pointed me to. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah. There are definitely, like, we could have made a chart of like every time he comes back to this, culminating then with the Meet the Blacks. Of like, if you're complaining there are not enough black people on my show, I'm going to have a whole family of them come and live with me. And then JB Smoove, who I had thought as an Onion writer was just somebody's nom de plume. I didn't realize this was like his stand-up act as well.
Yeah, he's very well known in the black community. Yeah, very well known.
But yes, and making him you want a black person on the show? I'm going to give you this person who acts like the most offensive version of, somebody. Yeah. Any initial thoughts about that, Lawrence? Given the amount that I do
not want to get too deep into this. I did not like it. I did not like it at all because I don't mind Richard Pryor doing it. I don't mind Jordan Peele doing it. I don't mind Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock. I don't mind a black comedian doing that. It felt really off and tone deaf, honestly, for a white comedian to do it, a white Jewish comedian, because there's such history between black folks and Jewish folks, and we try to work together, but it doesn't always work well. And so I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. Like I wasn't like I got the joke that he was trying to make. I just thought it was a bad joke, and I thought that it was coming from a not great source. And so when he starts doing that race stuff, and like you can kind of tell that he's trying to appeal to them without offending them. I give him credit for trying, but I don't think it was worth it. I don't think it worked. I don't think it was necessarily good. Now, when he then goes into the Me Too stuff, I'm really interested in what Sarah has to say about that, because I think he's just as ham-fisted with the Me Too stuff, but I'm a guy, so I need a woman to tell me what she thinks about that.
What, remind me of what were the Me Too plot points?
Oh, so you probably didn't get up to that season, that there's a whole thing of him making comments to his secretary, Liz, about like, oh, let me look at your sweater. And, the kind of stuff that he's obsessed about buttons and just clothing, articles of clothing.
She has a tattoo and he asks her too many questions about the tattoo and why she got the tattoo and why is it on her arm and not on her ass and all of these kinds of things.
But it's not coming from a good place. Like, is that a joke a guy can do? Is that a joke a man is able to do? I'm asking honestly.
I think so. I mean, I think you can. But I don't know if it's successful or not. It may not be. I think that you can do anything, but there are consequences. So if it's not funny, it's not funny. Or if it's offensive.
But even if it is funny, can he do it? Okay, so I guess me and Sarah disagree. Or we're going to diverge here. For me, the ultimate judge of whether or not something is worth doing is not, is it funny? Because there are many things that you can do that are funny. For example, blackface performers who used to like make jokes about eating, fried chicken and watermelon, they were funny. It was offensive, but it was funny, right? So something being funny does not necessarily, make it okay. My question is, can he do that? Like, should he be allowed to do that? That's a harder question. It's a deeper question. I'm sorry I'm a philosopher, but that was what was going through my mind when I was watching this.
But what is he doing exactly, given that he's not writing the specific lines that are being said?
But he's saying them.
He is coming up with the situations.
But he's saying them. He is saying them.
And the situations, the situations are the crux of the thing. What's the plot of the Affirmers? I was going to talk about the Lawn Jockey in this context, but not everyone's seen it.
Oh, I saw the Lawn Jockey.
Oh, you saw the Lawn Jockey?
Yeah, I saw all the last season.
So in a situation like that, where like the joke is he's got this like racist lawn jockey statue in his car, and he's trying to impress a bunch of people from a black church, and he's making too much of a big deal about the heroics that he performed, so he's setting himself up for a fall. But it's not clear to me, because most of the time through Curb, the answer that I would have to Lawrence's question is, it's usually okay, the jokes that he's making, because he takes pains to make himself the butt of the joke.
True.
And it seems like the kind of character that Larry David's playing in Curb, especially when he's when he's having dealings with black communities, is not unlike the kind of white character that you might see portrayed in a Chris Rock or a Richard Pryor routine, where he's the clueless, well-meaning, wealthy idiot.
Maybe
is the kind of position that he's trying to put himself in.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's a really open question as to whether that's enough to make, because clearly the main thing that's going on is he finds something very funny about being in a position where he's being a social pariah for reasons that he thinks are explainable, but they're not really forgivable. I don't know whether it's okay, but I think he probably takes the best swing at it that someone can do. And I never felt like he crossed the line, really, but I don't think that's an easy call to make.
Who is the right person to make that call on where the line is and if he's crossed it? And I mean that sincerely. I don't know if I'm the right person to, if I think something is funny, if I think one of the racial jokes is funny, I'm probably not the right person to make the call on whether or not he's stepped over a line. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I mean, I'll say, man, there's a lot here. There's a friend of mine who is a philosopher. He was at Rutgers. I think he's going to University of Illinois Urbana. Anyway, but he does race and philosophy. He's a really good philosopher. He's a good friend of mine. I've done stuff with him. And we talk a lot about what was the function of black comedians and what were they doing? And they were shining, they were being funny, yes, but they were shining a light that there was a purpose to what they were doing. Richard Pryor, there's a purpose what he was doing. And yes, they were funny. And yes, they were kind of, but there was a purpose to it. The people who are watching this show are not black. That is not the audience of this show. The audience of the show is white people, Jewish people. I mean, that's the audience, right? I have never, well, I'm not going to say never, but I've very rarely heard a black person say, yo, man, I watched that Curb Your Enthusiasm. That shit was funny. That's just not what we talk about. That's not who we're watching. Yeah. And so if the audience is white people, these racial jokes feel weird to me. Like it just feels off base. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying that on a gut level, it made me uncomfortable. And that was a large reason for why I didn't, because I don't mind, like, do one episode. One episode, get out your system. But the fact that it was a reoccurring thing and he kept going back to race and he kept bringing stuff up and he kept doing things that were like well-meaning but also offensive, it made me very uncomfortable. It just did. It made me very uncomfortable.
I wonder if it's because some of the earlier episodes did not age very well. Like there was one episode where he encounters a woman with a burka, and that episode is objectively offensive today, but it was from 20 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know where his head is right now, if he's trying to make up for some of the kind of offensive material that he had written before, or if he's just can't stop himself from wanting to explore these issues. I don't know.
I think it's much more like the latter. And I think that episode was exactly as offensive 20 years ago as it is today. But maybe just for a slightly stronger defense of Larry David, although probably still not a conclusive one, if what he's interested in is talking about manners and making jokes about manners and polite society, is there something to be said for the idea that in order to make that show about especially being wealthy in Los Angeles, you can't not talk about race and about crossing like racial societal boundaries? And like he does deal with, like, he deals with disability a lot in the show. He deals with gay, trans people. It makes me feel slightly better that it is an improv show and that there are always people from the group that he is making jokes about or with in the scenes with him. And it tells you something about where the humor's coming from, that like everybody involved in the scene is coming up with the jokes. Again, I don't think it's conclusive. There's certainly more thought behind it than, it's not like standard redneck white grievance comedy, right?
I think folks like Ricky Gervais and John Cleese, lots of older British, but any white guy comedians don't have any tolerance for wokeism, and the way that they complain about it just makes them sound like grumpy old men. Since this show is about talking about what offends people, I think that it sort of gets a pass in a way that these other things don't, because it is specifically, it's not about him saying, you guys are all being ridiculous. Like it often just leaves, oh, what a funny world we're in. That's kind of, it's an existential show in that sense, that he's never, I think that ambiguity that you pointed out, Lawrence, is exactly at the heart of it, of like, who knows who's right? Like, we just have our quirks and we're in these funny situations. I'm interested, like, what the process was. I'd be interested in, there was one plot about like Leon is embarrassed to be seen eating watermelon because that's like but where did Larry get that idea? Like, clearly Leon was involved in the way the joke was elaborated, but like that seems like something like that a black comedian might come up with. Was that a Leon idea in the first place, or some at least him having a conversation with somebody, or was it just this very mechanical? Like the burka thing was entirely because, and it was Moon Unit Zappa who was wearing the burka. I looked it up.
Oh, no kidding.
It was not Frank Zappa's child, that he was having this ongoing thing with a supposedly blind character, of course not a real blind person, and insisted on being with really hot women. Like, and he's like, you can't see him? Why do you care? Well, other people can see him. It's unfair that other people can see how hot my girlfriend is and I can't see. So they find someone with a burqa that nobody gets to see her. It's genius that this is the kind of thing that is like a comedian, an armchair comedian, coming up with a clever semi-mathematical, blind person plus person that can't be seen. That has nothing to do with like the actual experience life of somebody who wears a burqa or the social implications of wearing a burqa. And they didn't get somebody who really wears a burqa. And it turns out actually that she's really ugly under that. And like, is that why she was wearing the burqa? Is that? So I just, that seems quite different than it's more reflective, I think, in like this watermelon or these later attempts.
Yeah, I don't know. That episode really rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, but maybe part of it too was just the whole idea of, 20 years ago, men were allowed to comment on your appearance. You're allowed to do that. It was very common for someone to tell me to smile if I'm walking down the street, that kind of stuff. And I'm really happy that the tides have turned on that. But still, it was, I did not appreciate that particular episode. But there were problematic episodes earlier on where, you would just, some of those behaviors that he wasn't really questioning were still really apparent, that you just don't see now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I was saying, like, as long as you're putting it under the microscope, then you can, use whatever. So he can say the N-word because that is what the discussion was at the time in a way that, he doesn't say that on the later episodes. Like, he has changed this over time. But, like, as much as you try to comment on manners, you're still controlled by the manners that are structuring the conversation.
Right. And it can't ever escape anyone that he is absolutely the definition of privilege. I mean, he's not just a white guy. He's like an uber wealthy white guy living in Los Angeles. He is absolutely, you look up privilege in the dictionary and it's Larry David.
And that's why because I wanted to like the show, and I did like the show when the show wasn't doing this kind of stuff. But it just rubbed me the wrong way when he was doing that kind of stuff. And so that's the reason why I had a reserved reaction to the show. Because if he would just like let go of of his incessant need to comment on race or comment on gender, this show would have been great. It would have worked. It's just that I want to love a show. I don't want to love a show reservedly. If that makes any kind of sense. Like that makes me wonder if the whole project was worth it. Like just make a good show. Stop fucking with race. Leave that alone. Like I'm a scholar of race. I'm like watching this shit. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, stop that. Like, don't do that. And this show would have been fine. I just wished he would not have done that. That's just what rubbed me the wrong way.
I could just imagine Larry David, if you saying that to him, saying, you want to love it reservedly? That's fine. I don't need unreservedly. Reservedly's okay.
He probably would have said that. He absolutely would have said that. He would have said that.
You want all plots about zippers? You want all plots about liability?
Yes.
Of if I borrow something from you and I break it, how much responsibility do I have?
Let's do that.
Because here's the thing: it is so much him. It is clearly him and his show and what he thinks is funny above all, and what he wants to talk about in order to make jokes. And to that extent, I think your reaction, Lawrence, is exactly the right one. I don't think it's an easy show to love unreservedly, because I don't think Larry David is an easy man to love unreservedly.
He absolutely is not. He is not. And you're right about that.
That's where so much of the magic comes from. Nobody but him could have made this show. So I guess why would you expect everything that he makes to be like tasteful, or even necessarily funny? Because like he shows you who he is pretty clearly in the show.
I wonder if we should talk about the finale or if that's kind of off limits, if it's too soon.
We can talk about the finale.
Let's do that, but I have one more topic first.
Okay.
Just so in case people haven't seen the finale, they can shut off. There's a category of joke that is neither zipper or product liability. Death, disease, cancer. What do you think about these like, there's a whole plot of he's about to break up with the Vivica A. Fox's character, but she's about to get cancer results, and like, oh, you can't break up with somebody if they have cancer. And that he doesn't, there's like a car race, and the fact that he doesn't get there in time, that like a whole season ends. Here, I'm spoiling something for somebody, by him having to face the prospect of caring for somebody with cancer. And there's a whole later discussion of with Richard Lewis and other people. You know, of course, Richard Lewis has passed away and looked like he was about to die.
Yeah, he looked
the whole last season.
Pretty bad. He looked pretty bad. He looked pretty bad.
He was still hilarious though, but yeah, he definitely
he looked very feeble.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a whole like, let's make a pact that if any of us gets cancer, we don't have to be friends with them. Just the burden of other people's problems. What you thought about the comment on that. And that's where the misanthropy comes. There's another one I was just watching where like somebody is dying in a restaurant. Does everybody have to just stand there and look until the situation is resolved? Or can you just sit down and eat your meal? Because like, am I helping? I'm not helping the situation. I should just be able to eat. I'm concerned.
Well, and also Tracy Ullman. Tracy Ullman like dishes it right back. Mm-hmm. Her character does.
That was a brilliant addition.
Yeah, she was fantastic.
That's a really good example of something that could have just been a Seinfeld plot. And I think wasn't there a Seinfeld plot involving George not wanting to look or wanting to break up with someone because he thought they might get ill, or pretending to be ill so that someone would break up with him? I forget which it was, but clearly just another fascination of Larry David. He describes himself as a hyperchondriac. I'm sure he is one, but clearly is terrified of being ill and thinks it's very funny.
So no objections to that.
What's your objection? Is it a taste thing?
I genuinely don't know what to say about that, because I can't lie, I found it funny. I don't know. Like, maybe I'm a bad person for finding it funny.
No, I think this is getting.
I found it funny.
This is when the show is most effective.
Yeah.
Because
agree.
it is really getting at something very serious that we have to deal with, and that we are really uncomfortable with how to deal with it. That it is really hard to care for someone when they're suffering. And so it would be nice to be just selfish and just be able to shut that out, because you have to in life. If every time you read the newspaper and something as terrible is happening to somebody on some part of the world, you weep over that. Like, this is an ongoing thing with me and my wife, and this might be just a gender thing of like, I have no problem just saying, okay, but my plate is big enough. I can't fit that. And so where these lines actually get drawn.
And also just the way that they deal with, like early on when Jeff goes and gets bypass surgery and he asks Larry to go and clean out his porn stash just in case he doesn't make it through the surgery. Like the things that they focus on when
it's so
he's
funny,
getting,
though. It's so funny.
It is so funny. It was so funny. But that episode is, I think, probably my favorite. That was the Porno Gill one. But that was so funny, like, to think about, like, oh, most of us would be like, oh, what can I do to help? Like, can I get you, casseroles? Can I, does Susie need anything? No.
Casseroles?
Go and get my corn stash so that nobody finds it if I'm dead.
Wait a minute. You're making casseroles for people? What are you doing?
Well, no, I'm not personally, but that's what typical, like a lot of people
do casseroles? Someone gets cancer, you get casseroles. Is that what happens? Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
Or someone's like spouse dies, or there's some big
or
thing.
If you get sick,
then like everybody joins together to provide them
dinner.
food.
But
and
why casseroles? Send me some wings. Like, don't send me no damn casserole. I don't want no casserole.
The point is, it's more delicious, sure, but it's something that you need to be able to heat it up over a period of days. Right?
Lasagna sounds great.
Lasagna
is also
something that's
don't send me no casserole.
freezable.
I want you guys to know, if you send me a casserole, I'm going to cuss you out. I hate casseroles.
Okay. All right.
And we've now devolved into a Curb Enthusiasm conversation.
Now we talk, But I do want to talk about the end.
Let's talk about it.
Yes, it's time. Time to turn off and watch the end.
Turn off. This is major spoilers. But what did you think of the end? Is it an improvement over the Seinfeld ending?
I mean, yes, but then the Seinfeld ending is famously one of the worst TV episodes anyone's ever made.
Do you think Larry David thinks that?
No, he definitely doesn't think that.
No, I think he thinks it was a nice fuck you
to
people who were expecting something formulaic and wanted the cheers, a sentimental Jerry shuts off the lights to his apartment that he's moving out of and isn't going to see Kramer as often or something, whatever fucking regular ending. I did not mind it when it happened, but I'm always the person who was like, oh, what an interesting choice you made. I respect you as an artist, and I don't necessarily, I don't remember my laughs per episode. And were my laughs per episode so much lower in that Seinfeld finale than they were in the previous season?
Yes, they were.
The previous seasons were already
yes, they were.
really silly.
Yes, they no. Listen,
the ones without Larry David were so silly they jumped the shark.
I absolutely
completely.
hated that final episode. I hated that episode. I was young. I was in I was in high school. I think I was like a junior in high school, and I expected the episode because I wasn't the refined critic that I am now, and the philosophical thinker and the deep stuff. And I read Kafka and I read Nietzsche and all that kind of shit. I was a high schooler, and I was expecting something funny, and I was like, "What the hell is this crap? What is this?" F you to Seinfeld, F you to whoever came up with this final episode. I don't care if they were terrible people and they deserved to go to jail. I wanted to laugh. And so when that episode came out, I was not like Mark and thinking about artistic. I wasn't that guy. I was like, this show effing sucked. Now, I have gone back and rewatched all that final season except for that last episode because I'm still pissed off about it. But I did not like it. Did not like it at all. Do not like it now. No, thank you.
Final season or
the final
just
episode?
The
final episode.
Okay.
Final season was
the
okay.
final season
was fine.
Has some. Isn't the soup Nazi in the final season? And like the parade episode where they're stuck in traffic in a parade.
I don't remember when. Yeah.
Great.
I'll say I didn't re-review it. I can't really say. All I remember was the bread on the fishing line and how silly that got.
But it was funny though.
Like that this is just something that would never have happened in season 4 or whatever.
It was so funny though. It was funny. It was funny.
The thing I hated about the Seinfeld finale was that Seinfeld is a show about nothing, but the finale was about so much. There was so much. There was so much backstory.
Right. Speak on
There's
it.
a whole like conceit that they had to do, and the ending of Seinfeld that I wanted is the ending that they did in the Seinfeld reunion in season 7 of Curb, which is that it ends up with them all sitting in bunks, having ideally the very same conversation that they had in the first episode of Seinfeld, like back in the pilot, because the lesson of the show should be nothing matters, nothing ever changes, everyone is the same prick that they always have been forever, and like that, and that's just what we have to deal with. I think that like Larry clearly has a hunger for justice, and he wants the world to know that he thinks Jerry and Elaine and Kramer should be in jail, and George especially. But so the Curb finale, they do exactly the same thing. They have people that Larry has wronged give evidence against him in court, not for a new made-up law this time, but as a part of a trial for a silly law, which is some kind of vague comment about recent political events. And what do you think? Is he just trying to do the same thing but better this time, or is the whole thing a joke about the Seinfeld finale?
I think he wanted another crack at it. I mean,
I think he did too.
And wasn't the title of the episode called like "No Lessons Learned"?
No
Something
lessons
like
learned.
That?
Yeah.
I mean, that sort of tells you everything you need to know. But did you predict that it was going to lead up to that? Did you know that it was going to end that way?
The first episode, he gets arrested for a crime in Georgia, and that was
for
at that point I was like, last episode's going to be in a courtroom.
Yeah.
Like clearly.
Yeah.
I don't know that I saw that far out, but
I didn't see it coming.
I would not have been surprised if he just ended the very same way as the previous one, just to say fuck you to people who didn't like the Seinfeld finale.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of did. So the episode ends a little bit differently because he gets out and all that kind of stuff, but it's essentially the same thing. So it's clearly him saying, I was right and you guys were wrong, right? Like
100%.
Like what I did was right. What I did was funny. It wasn't really funny, but what I did made sense, and you guys were wrong to dislike it. He gave us the exact same thing over again, which I mean, I don't love it, but I respect it. Like he clearly, he did not grow. He didn't learn. He didn't do anything. He stuck to his guns, and he thought that he was right. And as an old white man, that tracks. That's how they are.
Is that also a thesis statement for the whole show? Is the way he did the finale also his way of saying, this is the show that I made, meaning the whole 8 seasons of Curb and all of Seinfeld before that? And if you don't like it, I really don't give a fuck because I made the show that I wanted to make.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I absolutely see that.
Absolutely.
And so we end. Any recommendations, any wish lists in terms of if somebody is, presumably they've seen the show, but maybe they haven't seen the whole show, what's the best way to approach this? Is it really just to start at the beginning, or is it just to get right to, the producer season or something like that is going to be like a coherent, like this is what the show is really about, the low-hanging fruit?
I think season 4 is a great place to start.
That's a great season.
That's the producer's season. It's got everything.
But don't skip Porno Gill.
Don't skip Porno Gill.
I mean, to be honest, this show is best, for me, the show is best digested not by trying to follow the entire season. Like, there are certain seasons that are really, really good, but really kind of jump in at certain episodes. Like, because earlier in the show, it's very episodic, right? Like, each episode is its own self-contained kind of story. There are some episodes that are really strong, some episodes that do not work as well, as Sarah has already commented on with Burka. Like, find certain episodes in those earlier seasons, watch those. But I do think that the producer's season is pretty good. I think the Seinfeld season is pretty good. And I really enjoyed these latter things, if you would like stop talking about race. But I enjoyed the latter seasons. So I think it's about just finding the right episodes, jumping in. But don't expect every season to work every single time. It's just not how it works.
Sounds good. I suppose we'll keep talking in some after talk.
Yes. Let me go get my charger real fast. My computer's about to die. I'll be right back.
Go to patreon.com/prettymuchpop if you want to hear that.
Peace out. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See ya. Get more Pretty Much Pop at prettymuchpop.com. Get bonus content for every episode at patreon.com/prettymuchpop. Pretty Much Pop is part of the Partially Examined Life podcast network, and it's also presented by openculture.com.